and welcome to SF Live TV. I'm your host, Christina Marie Flores. Well, if you were a native like I am, then you'd be very excited to see our next guest. Actually, he's been in the comedy scene from way back here in San Francisco, a local San Francisco native and funny man, Dan St. Paul. Hi, Dan.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Good.
An SF native.
Born up around near Geneva and Mission,
Okay.
what we call the outer Mission. Not quite the Excelsior, just a little bit further south toward Daly City, 14 Mission land. Yeah.
What's the biggest changes now than then in that area?
In that area, when I grew up in the outer Mission, it was really mixed. I mean, on my block, I had Carrie Fong, Michael Laverne, Danny Houghton. It was like on my steps. It was like me, a black kid, a Chinese kid, an Irish kid. We looked like an ad for Benetton,
Nice,
and
nice.
a Chinese kid, and the street all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that so strongly, rading the Schwinn bike with the banana seat.
Yeah.
Like for hours and hours.
Absolutely.
My parents didn't think I was kidnapped. They just thought I'm riding my Schwinn or my big wheel.
Yeah.
Having fun. And now it's really much different. I mean, because your kids are gone for a certain amount of time and you're kind of like, where are they now?
Oh, it was so much freedom, and we're talking the 60s,
Yeah.
I was born in 52. So, my parents thought nothing of me just jumping on the 14 Mission and, taking a ride down to see my friends who lived in the Mission, because I went to school at Immaculate Conception, which was like on Folsom.
You went to
and
school
Army.
at Immaculate Conception.
Immaculate Conception, that's right.
Name of the school, not an excuse.
No, all
That's what
right.
my mom used to say.
ICE, not ICA.
Exactly.
And so I took the 14 Mission down all the time. It's funny, I remember, because sometimes I'd go downtown a lot, and you'd go through the Mission and on the 14, and I always passed the Tower Theater. The Tower Theater only had Latin movies, Spanish movies, and every time I go by, in the window it always said "Hoy." Every day it said "Hoy, Hoy," and every movie, it said "Hoy," and I remember thinking, man, this guy Hoy is in every film.
He's a superstar.
He's amazing. This guy gets a lot of work. Yeah.
Now, you wanted to be a comic. Did you know when you were a little kid that you wanted to be a comic? Were you funny as a kid?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
I was. Yeah.
okay.
I was always looking for the funny.
So when you
kid.
said, Dad, Mom, I think I'm going to be a comic, after they strangled you?
They strangled me because they had paid for my education.
And what did they want you to be?
Well, I was a teacher, actually. I have a master's degree in special education. And I
okay.
got my bachelor's in Berkeley in Italian. I spoke Italian already because my parents were native Italians. But I majored in Italian because I didn't want my education to get in the way of my college experience. So I had become a teacher, a special ed teacher, and actually taught for a couple of years in Walnut Creek and Alamo. And I had decided that after my second year of teaching that I really wasn't that good at it.
What didn't you like about teaching? What was it?
I'm really scattered. I'm really not the neatest person.
Okay.
I'm not dirty, but I'm not neat. And to run a classroom, you have to have some semblance of order.
Okay.
It
Can't
helps.
fake it?
No.
No? Okay.
And I really connected with the kids, emotionally strong bonds. But when it became to the actual teaching, I wasn't that good at it. And that summer I went on a camping trip with two friends of mine, and after the trip we were almost in Oregon, so we went over to Ashland and caught the Shakespeare Festival. And I just remember watching Henry IV Part 2 and thinking to myself, I got to be up there. That's where I'm supposed to be. It's up there, not in front of a bunch of kids, in front of an audience. And so I came back and I quit my job, and my mother wouldn't let me tell my father for like 6 months. Yeah, because he's a hardworking Italian guy.
Yeah.
He's a waiter at Tadich Grill here in town.
Oh, I love
yeah.
Tadich,
And
yeah.
before that, another place called Polo's, which was on Mason. And actually, he started when he came over in 1948. He was working as a dishwasher at Bruno's, which is still there on Mission.
Oh, I go to Bruno's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he wanted his son to be a professional something.
Okay.
And so it was a little difficult, but finally I was able to do it.
So show me your dad's face when you said, Dad, I'm a comedian. I'm going to be a comedian.
My dad, just like I remember we were in a car. I remember the time exactly the place where we were, and I said, Dad, I'm not teaching again. He went, what? And I said, I'm not a teacher anymore. He goes, what do you mean? I said, yeah, I decided I'm going to be an actor. He goes, well, how are you going to make money? And I said, well, I'm working at the hospital part-time, and I'm, waiting table at night. And he goes, you waiting table where? And I told him, at Bateau Eve in Berkeley. And he goes, yeah, how much you make?
Oh, no.
I go, well, yeah, that's not bad. Okay. He was cool about it, totally cool about it.
Okay.
And then really proud. I was in the comedy competition in 1989, and it was at the Louise Davies Symphony Hall. And Ellen DeGeneres hosted it, and I did really well, and my dad was just like, after the show, like, oh, my son,
my son,
really proud.
He brings you back in the family.
Yeah, it was all cool.
So when did you start doing open mics and everything? You decided you wanted to be a comic. What year was this, by the way?
I decided I quit teaching in 1978, and then I started auditioning at theaters around town just to act, and I went to ACT Summer Training Con, which was like 10 weeks of intensive theater in all different disciplines. And then I did a few shows, Magic Theater, the Julian Theater, and then I happened to do a show at the Eureka Theater, not far from the studio at the time, 16th and Mission Market, and we did a terrible show about Chinese nomads on the steppes of China in the 10th century, and it was a big cast, and we had to go through all this kung fu training and stuff, and weird Chinese kind of stuff, and with big poles and all this stuff, and all dressed up in Chinese garb to look Chinese. I don't know, nowadays they would never do it. They couldn't. No, of course. But then, and there was a woman in the show who, her and I in the dressing room would crack everybody up, and we would do this every night. And we were developing this bond where we were really working well off each other. And we sat opposite each other so we could see each other in our mirrors, And it was, at one point I just said, I got to do something, make something more of this. I saw an opportunity. So I started writing sketches about male-female relationships and whatnot. And I presented them to her. And I said, would you be interested in working on a stand-up comedy stage instead of a theater stage? And she'd never been to a stand-up comedy show before. So we started attending the open mics, at the other cafe.
Oh, yeah.
And just watching people and whatnot. And, just getting more confidence and rehearsing. We were writing and rehearsing for 8 months before we even stepped on a comedy stage. So we had our routines together.
Yeah.
We were rehearsed. We were actors. So we were rehearsed and we were ready. And we stepped on stage December 30th, 1980 at the Holy City Zoo. And they made us go on kind of late, but there was still a crowd. And it was, night before New Year's Eve. And we did like 5 minutes and killed. We
Excellent.
Just killed. And we thought, oh my God, we're going to be stars. We're naturals. So we went afterwards across the street to this bar, the Caspian, smoked cigarettes and drank and had thought we were going to be really cool. So then, they gave us John Cantu, who was running the place, said, okay, well, you can come back next week. We'll give you 7 minutes. So great. So we came back next week and we did 7 minutes, but entirely different material, not the same things. It was a whole different bit, and it was a 7-minute bit. And we got in the bit, and they weren't buying it.
Oh, no.
And we couldn't get out.
And that was your only bit, yeah. Oh,
well, it was the only bit we had planned.
Yeah, for 7 minutes.
We couldn't get out because we were actors, not comedians. And that started a long road that night, a long journey.
So the woman you're speaking of,
Sue Murphy, yes.
who also plays San Francisco all the time and is everywhere.
I think Sue right now, if I'm not mistaken, I think she's still doing this, but she's writing for Chelsea Handler on the E! channel.
That's why she's sometimes funny.
Probably.
Right, because of Sue Murphy.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Now you're talking about the other. We're talking about the Holy City Zoo. Now this was the primo comedy in that time. I mean, that's when everything was going. We had the comedy at the Punchline Battery, but also the Improv was here.
Play.
The Improv was on Mason
Improv opened
Street.
a little bit later on.
Okay.
On Mason. Yeah, a little bit later on. But the initial clubs were the Zoo, the Holy City Zoo, the other cafe, and the Punchline. Those were the 3 clubs in San Francisco in 1980 and 81 that everybody played.